Hello and welcome to week 8. This week we are discussing function parameters. So a function parameter means you have values that you pass to the function that the function can then use. So let's look here. We have a function called average and it returns a double and it has two parameters. One is a double that's called A and the other is a double that's called B. So basically these are variables that are being declared in the function in order to use them. So then within the function we have here that the average is A plus B divided by 2 and then we return the average. So what happens when we call the function? Right here, we're calling the average function. We're passing 10 and 20. That means the 10 gets copied to A. So A now has a value of 10. And the 20 gets copied to B. So B now has a value of 20. So when it comes in here to calculate the average, A has a value of 10, B has a value of 20. So you add those together, you get 30 divided by 2, and it returns 15. So then what gets printed? 15. So the same here, now we call average again. This time, A gets a value of 3, and B gets the value of 4. And so then you calculate the average. Here's another example. You can pass a variable to a function as a parameter, as an argument. So here I have this variable called val. It has a value 5. So we're going to pass -5 and 5. So obviously the average is going to be 0. And then we have another example here. So this is how we pass a values to a function instead of having to declare global variables that are, class variables that you can use in the entire class. This way, you're keeping everything kind of more compact. It makes more sense. You can call the average function from anywhere and just pass it to values and you get back an average. Okay, here's another example. Here we have a class called eyes before, and what it does is it draws eyes on the screen, and we saw this function earlier in the semester. So what it does is it makes a left eye, it makes a right eye, and then you can click to make more eyes. And each of the eyes is just made completely separately. It sets values for where to put the X and the Y. It puts them next to each other. It creates the outside of the eye, the white of the eye, and the iris. And it's making two different eyes. And then in update, if you click the screen, it makes another eye at a random place. So it's copying this code 3 times, as you can see. So that is not the best way to write the code. Here's a better way to write the code. This code has a function here called makeEye down at the bottom. You can see it. And what that does is it makes a single eye depending on when it's called. And we have up here an X and a Y that are class variables. So if we change the X or the Y, we can then make an eye at wherever we put X and Y. So it takes the code that made each of the eyes, and now all we have to do is set our X and our Y, and then we can call the function. Set the X and the Y, call the function. Here, every time it's clicked, it just figures out a new X and a new Y where it was clicked, and it makes the eye there. So this is better. This is making the code to create the eye only one time, but we still have to set the X and the Y every single time we're going to make the eye, and we have to use these class variables to make it kind of global so that the X and the Y, when they get set, the function can use them. So here is one last way, and this is a even better way, and you can see the size of the code is much smaller here. So what this does is we've changed the make_i function so that it takes in two variables, two double variables, one they're calling x and one they're calling y. So what happens is right here, make_i gets called at 3530. So 35, x becomes 35 and y becomes 30. So the first time we make the I, that's what the x and y are here. So we don't have to have any class variables, and we just have to call the function with the coordinates that we want, where we want the I to be. So the same thing with the second one, the 6530, it then makes that I, and then every time you click, it's just going to look at where you clicked, where the x and y are, and it's going to make the I there. So this code is so much more compact, it makes more sense, it's easier to follow, and it's a much better way to write it. Here's another example. This one is a class called makeTargets. We've seen something like this before as well, where we made targets with the outside red and then white and then red. So this is pretty good. We have a make random target function that's a void function. It doesn't return anything. And we can call it 4 times and it will draw 4 targets. And what it first does is it finds an x and a y by calling this random coordinate, which basically is another function that returns a double that figures out a random number between 0 and 100. And yes, you might be saying that that's kind of silly because you could just be calling the random function right here, but this is an example of how you can write another function that returns a value and use it within a function. So that's getting a random coordinate for your x and then a random coordinate for your y, and then drawing the target using those coordinates. Here is an even better example. We have here make target parameters, and so what it's doing is instead of the make target over here with no parameters, this function is making targets, but you pass the parameters. So this function doesn't have to declare 2 variables and create the random coordinates. What happens is you pass the 2 variables that are coordinates. So you can make them random coordinates or any coordinates you want, and it will make a target at that place. And all it does is draws the 3 circles. Now here we're going to make targets using our random coordinate function, so you call it for either for both the x and the y coordinate, and that passes back a random number between 0 and 100, and then those values are used for the make target function. So whatever is passed back for the first random coordinate here gets put into the x, and whatever is passed back for the second coordinate here gets put into the y, and then that is used for the x and y's to create the target. So you can see that that's a cleaner way to write this function. This next example is actually in the reading for the week, but in the reading it has a mistake. In the reading, the function is just called 3 times, make bar, make bar, make bar, without assigning the return value to a variable. You can see that make bar returns a game object. The person who wrote the write-up for this week forgot to do something with that return value. So what I've done is I've created 3 variables, bar 1, bar 2, bar 3, and assigned them to the return value of the make bar function. So you can see that we're calling make bar with 3 values. So if we look down here at the make bar function, it takes 3 variables. One is the y coordinate, next is the width of the rectangle, and last is the color of the rectangle. So if you recall, the CTRECT function takes an X coordinate, a Y coordinate, a width and a height, and a color. So this is going to make all of any bar that we create, any rectangle. It's going to have an X coordinate of 50, but we can give it a Y coordinate, whatever Y coordinate we want. We can give it whatever width we want, but it will have a height of 5, and we can give it whatever color we want. Then it's going to set the line width, which is the outside line. It's going to draw a line on the outside of size 2, and it's going to set the color of that line to dark gray, and then it's going to return the bar. So the first time we call it, we're going to have a Y of 30, a width of 20, and the color is green. So it's going to draw a rectangle at 50, 30, with the width of 20, the height of 5, and the color of green. And the next time we call it, we give it 35, 40 yellow. So that's going to have a X of 50, a Y will be 35, the width will be 40, the height will be 5, the color will be green. The outline is the same. So this is a nice way to use a function passing variables, and you can pass variables of any type. You just have to declare them when you declare the function, and then you just need to make sure that when you call the function, you call the values with the type of variable that you want it to have. Note that even though these are double, we're passing an integer. It's okay to do that. An integer can automatically be changed into a double. But if it was the other way around, if this was an integer and we tried to pass a double, it would not work. So the only time that you can pass a different type value is if you are passing an integer into a double. Otherwise, you have to match the types and the order. It's very important. You can see here that we create a third bar, and then we make the third bar move down. So we can, once we have those bars, we can do anything with those variables that we want to. And there are 3 separate variables, 3 separate rectangles on the screen. Here's one last example. It's also in the reading, and it also has the same sort of errors that the last example had. In the reading, it just has make coin, make coin, make coin called 3 times or 4 times. Well, this one I think it does correctly. But I have actually made it so that I have 4 different variables that I've declared and assign each one of those to the make coin call to the function. So we have the make coin function here. It returns a game object. And so what happens is it's going to take an X and a Y and a color, a string, and it's going to create a circle at that X and Y of size 10 with the color that it's given. It's going to then outline the circle in gray, and the width of that gray outline is going to be 2 pixels. And it's going to then return the coin. So it will be returning a game object that is a circle. So the first one here, it's making, I'll call it a penny, and it's going to be putting it at 20, 30, X 20, Y 30, and it's going to make it orange. So when we come in here, the X is 20, the Y is 30, and the color is orange. And notice we can just use the variable color. We've passed it a string. That string has to be in double quotes. But here, when we use the variable, there are no double quotes. It is a string variable, so it has a value of orange the first time. The next time, we're going to make a dime. Its color is going to be light gray. Then we're going to make another penny that's orange. And then we'll make another dime that's light gray. And we're going to set its speed to 0.5. So that dime, wherever it is on the screen, which will be at X 80, Y 30, will then start moving down the screen. So here's the other example in the write-up. This takes, instead of calling make coin for the different types of coins, they've made functions here for making the different types of coins. So to make a penny, we're going to make a coin with orange. To make a dime, we're going to make a coin with light gray. So what happens is make penny calls make coin and creates the coin that looks like a penny. That gets returned here, and then that object gets returned back to where it's called. So now from our start function, we can call make penny, make dime, make penny, make dime, and it just makes a lot more sense. We can see better what kind of coin we're making. We've split the code up a little bit. We don't have to copy this code every time we call the function, the make coin function. All we have to do is give it an X and a Y. Orange is always going to be for pennies. Light gray is always going to be for dimes. If you wanted to make other coins, you can actually change this function so that maybe you also pass the size, and then you could make a quarter that's a bigger size, or a nickel. So you could add another parameter here that's the size of the coin and make a lot more different types of coins. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about your programming assignment for the week, program 7. For this program, you're going to set your code syntax level to 10 and start with a blank program, and then you're going to add functions as per what is defined in the assignment. So first, you're going to create a function called draw donut, and the way that you call the function is like this. So you will have to figure out how to define the function given that we call it with an X, a Y, a diameter, which is a number, and a color, which is a string. It's then going to draw a donut at the position, the X and Y, and the color that it's given, and then it's going to use that diameter, but it's going to put a white hole in the center of the donut that's a quarter of the size of the donut. So you can see over here, I have a donut, and then I have a hole that's a quarter of the size. A donut and a hole, a donut and a hole. So what you do then in your start function, once you have that draw donut function working, is you're going to make 3 random calls to the draw donut function, just like I did here. I have 3 donuts on my screen, and that I did in the start, and that's going to stay in the program. It's part of the program. Next, we're going to put little sprinkles on our donuts, as you can see here. And there's going to be a function called sprinkle color that picks what color of sprinkle to put on the donut. And it's going to return a string. So this is going to decide which color to put on the donut depending on what color the donut is. And it says that donut sprinkles should be brown unless the donut is brown, and then the sprinkles should be white. So you're going to have an if statement to see what the color is. You're going to pass it a color, and then you're going to determine what the sprinkles should be. So you can see here, you are then going to have 3 print statements in start that call the sprinkle color function and print out what color the sprinkles are. So you're going to print a yellow donut gets brown sprinkles. Now I didn't just write the word brown here. I called the sprinkle color function with a color of donut to get that is brown. And then an orange, so I'm going to call it with a yellow donut, with yellow. And then I'm going to call the sprinkle color function with orange, and I should get that it prints that it has a brown sprinkle, and then I'll call it with brown and it'll get a white sprinkle. So you have to call the sprinkle color function in order to get the color that you're printing out here for the color of the sprinkles. That proves that your sprinkle color function is working correctly. Okay, that's basically testing it. You're going to leave those tests in, so all of that's going to stay in your code. Then you're going to create a function called random angle, and I describe what to do here. You're going to return a double. It takes radians, and you calculate the angle, and I give you a math equation here that return the result. Next, you'll have another function called add sprinkle. You'll call that from draw donut. So make sure that when you're reading the instructions that you're calling your functions from where I indicate to call the functions from. Okay, the add sprinkle function is going to use the sprinkle color function and the random angle function in order to figure out how to add the sprinkles. And I've given you the math for that here. Okay, you're then going to write a function called add sprinkles. What that does is it calls the add sprinkle function a whole bunch of times for a donut. And so yes, you are going to have a whole bunch of calls to add sprinkle inside of add sprinkles. You'll be doing add sprinkle, add sprinkle, add sprinkle, add sprinkle, maybe 6 of them or however many you want. So yes, that's not the best way to code, but for this project, since we don't know how to do loops yet, that's how we're going to do it. You will draw it as many times as you need to. Okay, next you're going to have your three donuts sitting out here. You're going to have your print statements here, and now you're going to ask the user to give a size of donuts, and then you're going to draw a dozen donuts. So they say you don't want the size to be larger than 20. So let's make it 15. That's my dozen donuts. I'm going to draw a box, and in my box I'm going to put my donuts, and I'm going to put 4 of each type of donut, and the donuts need to fill the box. So if I start this over again and I make it 10, my donuts are still filling the box. If I do it again and I make it 20, my donuts are still filling the box, and I have the 3 colors of donut. So hopefully this makes sense, being able to see what I'm expecting in the program. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me, come to my office hours, whatever you need to do to get through the assignment. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week.